up. So I'm now turning on the recording, and be aware that if you decide to unmute yourself at any point to ask questions or make your camera visible, that you will become part of the recording. Where to begin? Picatrix, as you probably know, and other grimoires have examples of image magic. Henry Cornelius Agrippa, in 3 books of occult philosophy, says things like, the image of this particular decan is a woman wearing a red dress and 2 horses. And what that means, we don't know, but that's the image. A woman in a red dress with 2 horses. Why is there so much of this image magic, and what purpose does it serve, and why is it in the tradition, and who is it for? When I first read the John Michael Greer, Christopher Warnock translation of Picatrix, that was the question that I had, was why are there these descriptions of images, and what are they for, and why are they there? That's a tricky question to try to answer, isn't it? Because maybe they're there so that people can construct magical images. Maybe they're there because it's part of the training of a magician to think about the world in a different way and to design pictures that tell stories. And maybe it is in order to encourage imagination, to train the brain somehow. All of those things seem to be true, all of them. That Picatrix comes out of a culture, Islam, and to some extent Judaism, where making images is prohibited. Making pictures of people is prohibited. Some of that is probably a reaction against the Byzantine tradition of icons, but some of it is the recognition that images are capable of holding magic in some fashion. The second thing is that images in some fashion are capable of telling stories or changing people's point of view or changing how people react to certain concepts. Images are capable of serving as a window into the spirit world in some fashion. They're capable of organizing and managing our relationship with the other side, whatever the other side happens to be in this particular case. So I began experimenting. I began practicing with images and with sculptures from a magical perspective. This was one of the early experiments with this. And it's broken now, but this was a candlestick with a little 3-dimensional candle on top of it. And essentially it's a pop-up book. Some of them were more successful than others, sort of 3-dimensional sigils. A tree, a sailboat, another sailboat, a cactus or a golem in the desert, a chalice and a disc sort of floating, a sort of monster riding on a cloud, a flower in a flower pot, a house. Depending on how you look at it, a sort of tower that's resting on a not very stable foot, or a ziggurat. A cup and a bottle. I made this in 2014. So the first thing that I did was actually sort of sculptural. I was working with kids and I was experimenting with paper, and I discovered that these kinds of structures are capable of changing people's attitudes, and that is to say that they function like magic. I went deeper. You know, every magician in theory should be keeping some kind of grimoire, some kind of book of spells. I never finished this one. My practice moved in other directions, but I thought, all right, what if I use Aidan Meehan's book and I illustrate the edges of books? You know, it still has the text in it, but what if I illustrate the edges of the book? I didn't get very far with that. But I did learn that there is an actual technical process for drawing the tree of life, involving 4 circles overlapping one another at the centers in a line. But I did quite a lot of these borders. In fact, I did more borders than I filled in the text in the middle of the book. And then I went deeper. I actually delved into Picatrix and I said, all right, what happens if you actually use some of the techniques and draw some of the pictures? Here's on one side the Orphic hymn to the planet Mars, and on the other side is Mars in his armor from Picatrix, from the description in Picatrix. Here is the image from Picatrix of the sun, right? A king treading down a dragon. What do we take away from this? Well, the first thing that I took away was that image magic is powerful. I don't know what your reaction is to seeing these pictures, but the act of drawing them is itself a change in consciousness. It is the thing that magic is supposed to do. It's supposed to change our consciousness in accordance with will. And the act of sitting down and drawing a picture of a particular deity or a specific power deepens your connection with that power and deepens your ability to react to that power. And it doesn't seem to matter if the illustrations are marginalia. This is Jack Parsons' We Are the Witchcraft. And it has just little bits and pieces of illustrations alongside of it. You know, Babylon and John Dee and a Minoan woman, just brief illustrations. And then, of course, Jack Parsons himself as almost an icon. Some of these I'm still working with, so I don't necessarily want to show them off. But it means that you can work with a specific image twice. You can, or even 3 times. 1, you're drawing it in pencil. 2, you are outlining the pencil illustration in black. And 3, you are coloring in your illustration. And that means that you can do a great deal of preparation ahead of time and then finish the image at the moment that a specific constellation or a specific conjunction occurs. I see that I have a question. Sarah Marie says, I'm reminded of movement-based meditation and how drawing is like evidence of focused intent. Yes, that drawing is in fact evidence of focused intent. So for that matter is writing by hand. The image of Venus is the image of a naked woman with a bird's head holding a staff and a comb. It may be hard to tell that that's a comb, but that's what that is. So react for a moment to the images that I've shown you. Do they feel like they carry some kind of energetic weight? To me, they do. To me, they carry a power that is unexpectedly large. And I feel that it is important to say that I am not a professional artist. I came to this very late. I'm now 49, and a fellow by the name of Dave Gray taught me how to draw in about 8 minutes in the back garden of a hotel in Avon, Connecticut in about 2007. So I have been at this for 10 or 12 years, and I have gotten better as a result of practice, but I am a talented amateur from the perspective of the drawing skills, but magically it's very powerful. Another important piece of it is the idea of text. Developing your handwriting to the point where your handwriting itself looks beautiful and you care about it is an important part of this process. These were Jason Miller's calls from his book, Advanced Planetary Magic. And I scried each of the Advanced Planetary Magic calls. I used them in my own magical process. I tried to identify what the standard picture would be for each of them. I wrote those down. And then I created illustrations for each of them. Now, some of the illustrations are not finished in the sense that they have not been colored in and they have not been completed, but each of them was constructed. For example, Saturn of Saturn was constructed on a day when Saturn was in its own sign at on a Saturday in a Saturn hour. And they function exactly like portals, as Sarah Marie says. Now, some of these portals, as a magician, I have not had to activate fully. So you get examples in this book like this, where I have done the sketches, but I haven't finished the images. Doing the initial sketch is itself an act of power. You can then come back over the image and you can finish the image later by doing the line work, and you are strengthening the capacity of the portal to do what it is supposed to do. And then when you come back and you put color into that image the third time, you are strengthening it further. So it's possible to layer up the image at 3 different occasions with 3 different astrological moments or carefully selected times that are designed to do the thing that they are supposed to do. Right? And that means that, among other things, this book is capable of sitting on an altar and being itself an altarpiece. It's capable of awakening you to what it is that you are supposed to know, and it is capable of connecting you to the spirit that you are trying to reach out to. So this is a new book. You haven't seen this one yet. For a while, I was doing a lot of Golden Dawn magic. I was calling on Michael and Raphael and Gabriel and Uriel. And this was the result. Illustrations specifically of the archangels of the four directions. They're a little wonky. I'm not very good, again, as I said, but it's not about whether or not you're good. It's about whether or not you've trained yourself to draw and think in terms of imagery on paper. And what you have drawn becomes part of your mental furniture, for lack of a better word. It becomes part of the way that you see the world. So if you draw the archangels or the spirits that you work with, chances are that you have a better and easier time accessing those spirits in the future. Which brings us to things like the mansions of the moon or the decans of the zodiac. Berenike has done a lot of really cool work online with the decans pictures. I did mine originally with the mansions of the moon. And these are the 15th and the 16th mansions, which are about wealth and prosperity. One of them is a man writing letters, and the other is a man working with scales and holding his ledgers open. So that gives you a sense of the kinds of things that drawing magic can do. And visual imagery. One more. This is going to be hard to see in the light. That's kind of to be expected. But these are the 16 signs of geomancy, the 15 Behenian stars, and 16 alchemical processes. You can see that each of these is formed into a small illustration where all of the information about that sign or that alchemical process is built into the sign. And I'm not going to be able to show all of them because of the light. But you are simultaneously learning geometry and how to draw. Which brings me to one other point. It seems to be the case that image magic relies on three things. It requires the image itself. It requires some kind of timing. You have to be drawing the picture at the right time. And finally, you have to be aware at some level of the geometry. Either there has to be a frame around the image, or the composition has to be geometric in some fashion. It's part of the reason why geometry is one of the 7 liberal arts. And it's part of the reason why I had to work my way through a book called Ruler and Compass by Andrew Sutton, doing all of the proofs one by one and writing myself a little book about how to do all of the geometric proofs that are a part of the illustrator's craft. if you're looking at these diagrams later on the recording, or even if you're looking at them now, chances are you're going to recognize that, for example, the process for finding the center of a circle, or the process for drawing a right triangle inside of a circle, or the procedures for drawing heptagons, 7-sided or 8-sided figures, start to resemble pentacles that you have seen in things like the Lesser Key of Solomon, right? Geometry was part of the education of the people who produced the grimoires. They were terrible artists, so they stuck to what they knew, which was lettering and geometry. Every so often, you'll see a pentacle of the moon will have the picture of a hand pointing to a specific letter. But the work of the geometer is to figure out how to do all of this. So I've now spent half an hour or so talking about why the artistic skills matter. Now we have to shift and we have to talk about how to develop those artistic skills so that you are capable of working magic with your pen and paper. Everybody ready? The clipboard is buried. This was taught to me by a guy by the name of Dave Gray. Dave is one of those guys who is a magician but doesn't know that he's a magician. He runs a company called X-Plane, which you can find on the web at xplane.com. He calls this the visual alphabet. I call it the semigram, from the Greek words semeion, meaning seed or dot, and gramma, meaning a line. So it's dot line, in the same way that alphabet is aleph, beth, first two letters of the alphabet. Take your piece of paper sideways, and in the upper left-hand corner, draw a dot. And down the side of the sheet of paper, you're going to draw dot, line, angle, arc, loop, spiral, and cloud. These are the flows. They're the vowels of the system. So anytime that you want to add energy into a drawing, you are adding flows in order to create movement or the sensation of movement on the part of the viewer, which sometimes is yourself. Across the top of your paper, you're doing triangle, square, pentagon. You're then going to skip a few sides and draw a stop sign, an octagon. A circle. And these are your forms. They're the way that you add structure to a drawing. So I'm going to leave this up for a minute. Would help if I held it in a way that you could see all of the figures so that you have a chance to copy it. And I'm going to put your thumbs down, and when you're ready to move on, let me know. Dot, line, angle, arc, loop, spiral, cloud. Those are your flows. And then your forms are dot, triangle, square, pentagon, octagon, circle. And those are your forms, the way that you add structure. All right. Few 30-second drawing tips or drawing practices. I'm again going to clear your thumbs up, and I'm going to say, draw a cat. 30 seconds. I'm going to do the same. Cat. It's not hard, right? Cat is easy. Try a dog. My dog always has a tendency to be blockier because dogs somehow seem blockier. But again, these are 30-second drawings. How about Paris? How would you draw Paris? Again, 30 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Paris is not particularly hard either. Draw Paris at night. Right? All I've done is add the crescent moon over the city. In other words, pictures are drawings like the ones that I showed you, the image magic, are themselves simply extended versions of these kinds of cat and dog drawings. These are basically pictographs, right? They're designed to suggest the thing rather than be the thing itself. The only thing that a painting by Michelangelo has going for it is time. That more time has been lavished on a Michelangelo painting, several hundred hours over several dozen weeks, in order to produce a specific image. But if you had that kind of practice and you had that kind of time, you would be able to produce results nearly as good. And the only thing that's required is time. If you take 30 seconds, you get this kind of a dog, or this kind of a Paris, or this kind of a cat. If you take an hour, you get something very different. And if you take 20 hours, you get something very different indeed. But all of them are capable of affecting consciousness in microscopic ways for these, or superpowered versions for the more time that you invest in the image. Does that make sense so far? I got thumbs up, that's good. All right. So, this is the astrology for right now. This is the moment that we are at. The sun is at 26 degrees Taurus, which is generally a favorable position. I've got a copy of Christopher Warnock's Mansions of the Moon. And we're going to look up where 26 degrees Taurus is. And 26 degrees Taurus is the 5th mansion, which is represented by the 3 small stars in the head of Orion. Universal body, favor, intellectual activity, health and goodwill, and safety. And a talisman of the 5th mansion is for receiving good things from kings and high officials. Fashion the image from silver, and in it sculpt a head without a body, and above the head write the name of the lord of the mansion, which is Gabiel, G-A-B-I-E-L. The image is a head without a body. Here's the illustration by Nigel Jackson. Head without a body, floating around in the stars. Right? So how do you draw a head without a body? And I picked the wrong notebook. Of course I did. Go with a smaller one. How do you draw a head without a body? Well, what does a head without a body look like? It's got to have a couple of circles for eyes, right? And those eyes have to be sort of inside of, here's my eyes, right? Those eyes sort of have to be inside of almond shapes that are composed of 2 different arcs. We're going to have a big arc like that. We have to have a couple of smaller arcs to sort of be suggestive of the nose. We want another arc which is sort of suggestive of the mouth, right? All I'm doing is I'm using Dave Gray's semigram or visual alphabet, right? A trio of different shaped arcs form the upper lip. Another arc forms the lower mouth, the lower part. People usually have like a little divot here, which we can indicate by a line. We want to indicate that he's smiling, so we give him a couple of laugh wrinkles, his little dimples around his mouth. He's going to look weird if he doesn't have eyebrows. And I want him to be somewhat energetic on my behalf. So I make his eyebrows a bunch of little short lines like this. And again, I want him to be energetic. So I'm going to do a bunch of arcs and lines and sort of circle shapes that are suggestive of hair. He's missing something. He's missing ears, right? And I can take my own ear and I can draw a line around my face, and I can see that my ear sort of lines up with my eye. And the bottom of my ear sort of lines up with my nose. And a friend taught me this. An ear is a big loop with 2 letter C's and a Y inside of it. Head without a body. I can give him a little bit of a neck. Gabrielle. And if you've done this, you now have an image that, one, provides you with health and goodwill, promises favors from high officials and from kings, and which allows you to connect with a power that you have never worked with before. Ta-da! You've just done image magic. How long did that take? 10 minutes. It's 3:42. Anybody feel like showing their image? Hey, look at that. Gabrielle. Beautiful handwriting too. Thank you very much for sharing.
Oh.
Fantastic. And I like how you've used your pencil to create some shading along the sides, right? That that the effectiveness of this is really powerful. And I really like your cat as well. Clearly you've had some practice drawing cats and dogs.
Thank you.
And Paris.
Croissant.
Your croissant is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clearly you've done this before, Sarah.
I'm cheating. I went to art school, I guess.
Why am I teaching this class? You already know everything.
Oh, but the combination of image and magic is what I need.
Right.
Awesome.
So if you walk into the typical bookstore, the typical occult bookstore today, and you go looking for a book that teaches art as magic, chances are you are not going to find it in the occult bookstore. Everything that you find in the occult bookstore is about words and herbs and stones, right? And that is because the world that we live in runs on image magic. You're standing in the bus stop. You are surrounded by advertising. It has incredibly buff guys and incredibly skinny girls standing on a beach promising you that if you only spend $999, you can have an amazing, incredible time in some resort in the Caribbean. if you spend $79 on a round trip ticket to Las Vegas, you too can be leaping up and down with excitement that you have won the lottery, or that you have won the slot machines, or you've won a game of blackjack, right? We are surrounded by image magic all the time, but we call it advertising, and we pretend that it has no power over us, but it does. And the society that we live in literally runs on image magic, and that's why you can't find it in the occult bookstore, because there's no point in teaching people about how image magic works, right? Because you're literally surrounded by it all the time. Gordon has said on the show at least once, and a number of other magicians have said this, that occultism is all about the forgotten disciplines, right? Well, every society has one form of magic that it celebrates and reveres, and another form of magic that it denigrates and that nobody uses. And our society runs on image magic, right? The president spoke at the White House today, and we get a picture on the screen of the president in front of the blue backdrop and the seal of the White House on the backdrop. And he points authoritatively and he answers questions. The current guy does it very badly, but you know, whatever. It still conveys the ideas of authority. It still conveys the ideas of responsibility. It still says someone is in charge. It still says all of these things about how the world works. And this is part of the reason why people who go to art school get pounded on by the corporate world, because everybody at the higher levels of the world right now knows that image magic is powerful, and they have no idea how to produce it themselves. They might be able to get the timing right, they might be able to get the words right, but the image is dependent upon photographers, it's dependent on photoshoppers, it's dependent on people who are capable of creating the image itself in order to get what they want. And it's part of the reason why image magic is not in the bookstores. And it's part of the reason why virtually nobody practices it, because we're surrounded by it all the time, and therefore we assume that it cannot be all that powerful, and yet it is in fact running our lives. Ta-da! Whoops. But I don't intend to go too far down that particular rabbit hole. For one thing, I don't really believe in conspiracies. For another, I think that a lot of it is inadvertent. I think that we have chosen to run our society on image magic, and we have then promptly forgotten that it is magic. I'm not really sure that anybody at the top of our social order has any idea that it works, and I'm not entirely sure that they would know image magic if it bit them on the leg. But I do think that in the Renaissance, they were using image magic quite regularly and deeply, and that it is part of the reason why it produced so many famous artists. Now, once the stores reopen, you can go and you can buy these little artists' trading cards. I use them for my decans work. Right? This is the third decan of Cancer. So when the sun is in a specific decan, I produce the image of the decan. And then they go into this little book, which has a black mirror on the front cover. It's very useful, right? It's got all these little plastic envelopes. And that means that I can look at the image of the decan that I'm currently working with, and then look into the black mirror, and I have the image on the card in my mind at the same time that I am staring into a black mirror. Sometimes I work the other way too. I'll stare into the black mirror and use that to generate the image that needs to be on the card. Does that help, Sarah? Excellent. And again, these images do not have to be hugely complicated, right? I keep getting screwed up by the camera. The third decan of Gemini is a fairly complicated image. It requires the field of view to be split in half, that there's one thing happening on the lower register, there's something else happening on the upper register. The second decan of Gemini, on the other hand, is not a very complicated card. It was supposed to show one person digging and another person blowing on a musical instrument. As it so happens, I ran out of time, and as a result, the image is not very sophisticated at all, but you can tell what everybody is doing. How did I learn how to do that? Well, the person who taught me how to do that is a children's illustrator by the name of Sachiko Umoto. Anybody heard of Sachiko Umoto before? Sarah has, apparently. I just had the book here. What did I do with it? I moved it because it's not in the place that I grabbed it from. Where did I put it down? Hang on. Her series is called Let's Draw. And the idea is that any kid at all should learn how to draw. She was originally a Japanese artist. This got translated. It comes in a nice book with a little pad, and she has a more advanced version that even comes with colored pencils. But this is fairly basic. All of her character creation involves the same process, right? Draw the face, a loop, just like Dave Gray taught me, and then put some eyes in it, put a nose between the eyes, add a body, add feet to the body, add arms to the body, and then conclude by adding on the hair and any sort of decoration that you want to add on to the shirt or the pants. And you can then add sort of a circle to ground the figure. All of her characters look like this, all of them. Later on, she gets more advanced by saying, this is how you draw in the bones. And once you know where the bones are, your ability to draw figures doing various kinds of activities will get better. You will understand how the skeleton moves so that you can show somebody who's running or somebody who is bending down. Sarah went to art school for a lot of money to learn how to do this, right? But it's the same process for kangaroos or for koalas as for elephants, right? That every single time you are constructing curves or lines or dots or squares in order to create the right angles and the right curvatures between things in order to be able to design figures. You want to add in background like trees, it's the same process. It's lines, angles, and then filling in details. She has in this book this elaborate process for creating an entire field with a picnic underneath it. Why is it that we have to go to a children's book like Sachiko Umoto or Ed Emberley, he's another guy I learned from, in order to do image magic? Why do you think? I mean, Sarah is already really good at this. Sarah says Ed Emberley's fingerprint book was my favorite as a kid. It was one of my favorites as an adult. As I said, I came to art very late. Mulish says, because my skills are in line with the 4-year-old more than the Michelangelo. Yes, I think that that's right. But whether you're Michelangelo or you're Sarah or you're Mulish or you're me, you're operating from a lot of reference photos. You're operating from a lot of live drawings of live events or people. You are operating from a baseline. And that baseline is very similar to the one that the author of Picatrix had. The author of Picatrix didn't say, draw lines, connect them, curve them in such a way, and then you'll have a picture of a person on a bridge. They said, draw the picture of a body without a head, or a head without a body, and write the name Gabriel above it. And if you feel like it, you know, douse it in sandalwood incense before, and make the petition to Gabriel to keep you safe and grant you favors from kings and princes and high magistrates. Awesome, you can do that. Sometimes the image is enough. And, you know, it's in my Moleskine. I'm carrying around my Moleskine just like an ordinary person. And people grant me favors and kindness because there happens to be an image of Gabriel in the book. Gabriel is helping me because Gabriel is in the book. I use reference photographs a lot. I will say to myself, oh, for this image, I'm supposed to have a picture of a monkey. And I will type into Google, cartoon image of a monkey, and it will come up with a cartoon image of a monkey, and I will copy that monkey. Sometimes I can't find a picture of a monkey that I like that's a cartoon, so I will try drawing it from a live reference photograph. It's not as good. I'm terrible at being able to follow the lines in that way, but it is still an effective piece of image magic. And in about 6 weeks, I went from people saying, wow, your drawings are terrible, to, wow, your drawings are really, really good. And if you encourage people to recognize that drawing is another way of seeing the world, if you encourage people to recognize that drawing is a tool of magic that changes your consciousness, then they're capable of seeing that it is a kind of magic. They're also capable of changing their viewpoint about what a thing is because they see it from a different angle. If you have drawn a block, or you probably did this when you were in school, coming back to my notebook here. It's not going to show, yes. You draw sort of a box and you create a few extra lines and then an angle, and you've got something that sort of vaguely resembles a cube. I'm sure everybody's done something like that, right? Well, what if the secret to image magic is not stopping doing that? Like kids, when they learn how to draw, eventually get stuck on the idea that they want to be able to draw a pencil perfectly, that they want to be able to draw a portrait of their friend perfectly. Those skills take art school, right? You need practice, you need attention from a teacher, you need training in how to do that. And there are videos that you can follow online, but the author of Picatrix didn't have that. The author of Picatrix didn't have Sachiko Umoto. The author of Picatrix lived in a culture that said that if you draw images, you can be put to death for being an artist. The author of Picatrix recognized, I think correctly, that drawing pictures was itself a magical skill that trained the mind to understand the world in a different way. It doesn't take too many of these drawings before you begin to think, oh, maybe the author of Picatrix was onto something. One, knowing how to draw pictures allows you to see the world differently. Number two, it allows you to do magic differently. And number three, it trains your brain. Why not? Why not do that? It's been an hour. Here ends the core lesson. Use the visual alphabet to draw. Stretch the amount of time that you draw so that the pictures develop and become stronger images over time. Do a pencil underdrawing, then an ink overlay, and then add color at different times and using different astrological or geological or astrological hour timings in order to work better magic. But recognize that the images themselves carry power and they function like portals that allow you to work with the spirits and the powers that you draw. Here ends the lesson. I am going